Welcome, everyone, again to another episode of Iron Age Marketing. I am Nikki P. here as always. My guest today is Michael Castleman. Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you are not the harbinger of doom that people may make you out to be?
Well, I am the author of a new book called The Untold Story of Books, a Writer's History of Book Publishing, that discusses the entire history of book publishing from Gutenberg in 1450 to today with Amazon and digital publishing and Kindles and the whole thing. I'm an author, and I've written 18 other books over the last 40 years. And during that time, I struggled a great deal, as most authors do, with how the crazy publishing world works. And you hear things, you hear all kinds of myths, and they don't really seem true and they don't pan out. Decades ago, I began researching the history of the book publishing industry in the hope that a 500-year perspective might shed some light. If reviewers can be believed, I have done that. The book has a great deal of perspective that most authors just don't know. So it's really a book for authors, both published and aspiring, who want to know about the business they're about to get into. And it's also for book lovers, bibliophiles who just love books and are curious about publishing and usually have a lot of myths running around in their heads. And so I try to debunk those myths and show people the truth of how publishing actually evolved and what it's really about today.
I'll ask the question because gets into my esoterica, but how conspiratorial do we get in this book about the publishing industry?
Not conspiratorial at all. The publishing industry has basically been a technological business from day one. It has always been defined by the technology of printing. And as printing has changed, the book business has changed. And today, with digital publishing, you can dispense with printing if you want to, although 85% of books are still read in print. So printing is still very much with us. But there's no conspiracy. There's no, it's the story of publishing is the story of people trying to harness technology, printing technology, to produce books any way they could under very changing circumstances over time. And it's those circumstances that dictated the business rather than a cobble of nasty publishers getting together to dictate it to us.
So there's finally a difference between the book industry and the recording industry, which I come from, because that's always been a front for the mob and money laundering.
The thing is, there's not enough money in book publishing to really attract mafia types. So they go for, bigger grossing enterprises like records and movies and, and hotels.
Yeah. So you, in your information, you kind of single out the year 2000 as a year of change. What is it about that year and what has changed since then?
Until 2000, the major technology of printing was high-speed industrial presses, which were used throughout the entire 20th century. And during the 20th century, those high-speed presses got even faster. But basically, all 20th century publishing used high-speed printing presses to publish tons and tons of books. But in 2000, that was the sort of time that digital publishing really began to take over. And with digital publishing, books are no longer physical objects, they are digital files that can be printed whenever you want them. And with print on demand, which is a digital form of printing, you have economical, cost-effective printing of short runs, which was impossible in industrial printing. Up until 2000, with industrial printing, it really did not make economic sense to print fewer than about 1,000 copies. But with digital publishing, you can print cost effectively pretty much any number of copies, 100, 200, 500. After 2000 was when digital readers, e-readers, e-books got developed and became a big deal. And e-readers like the Kindle took off and they became a big deal too. And so after 2000, even though most books are still read in print, they get printed differently, often with digital printing, and some of them don't get printed at all. Some of them are read as ebooks. And so 2000 really marks the beginning of what I call the third book business. The first book business was Gutenberg until the late 19th century, which used a small cottage industry type printing presses for many hundreds of years. And then in the 20th century, we had high speed industrial printing. And today we have digital printing and publishing. And so there have been really three different phases of the book business. And each of those phases has presented opportunities and perils that authors and publishers have had to contend with.
Well, given you obviously understand a lot about the history here, the thing that I always come to blows with is that, like, spending $15 on a physical product, I will never have a problem with. I still buy CDs because I like physical product. But when they want to charge me like the same $15 for something that I don't have a physical copy of, it doesn't make economic sense to me to purchase that. Is there a reason why they still think that we should be charged the same amount for their non-product that they're putting out?
Well,
And I know that most of the prices as we buy things online are defined by the companies. They have nothing to do with the authors in a lot of cases. Amazon sells your book for what they want to sell your book for.
that is true. The cost to produce an item doesn't necessarily reflect the cost that is charged. There's been a whole lot of contention about what ebooks should cost. When they were originally introduced, publishers wanted to charge $12.95 for ebooks, which was cheaper than the $19.95 for trade paperbacks. And publishers felt good about that. But Amazon came along and said, no, we're going to sell them for $9.95. And publishers flipped out and thought, we're going to not make a whole lot of money. Well, actually, now you can buy ebooks on Amazon for less than $1. I mean, a lot of people, you can get ebooks, they're giving them away. There are so many now. Digital publishing has increased the number of books available by huge orders of magnitude. In 1980, American publishers released 45,000 different titles. 45,000. In 2010, since 2005 or so, publishers and self-publishers and indie presses and all the new players in publishing have released more than 2 million books a year. That's 44 times as many. Now, from 1980 to today, the population of the United States has increased about 20-25%. But the number of books being released has increased 4,400%. And so we have today a book glut like no one ever imagined. And when there's a glut, prices fall. And that's what's happened to books. So yes, your trade paperback still costs, $17, $18, $19. And if you buy books for Kindle, you're going to pay $5, $6, $7. But if you look for them, you can get books a lot cheaper than that.
Okay. I wish I liked reading books on like a digital format personally, because that's good to hear. I'm still thinking, apparently looking at things from a couple years ago where I was, man, they were charging me way too much for something that's just a couple pieces of code.
Right. Well, there's plenty of software that brings a high price, and it's just a whole bunch of code.
So, what does this all, I guess, mean for authors? Obviously, there's a lot more people going for a shrinking chunk of the pie, but
Yes.
does that mean give up, or does that mean react to the game differently? Maybe change what the book means in the system.
Well, I exhort authors to change their expectations. In the 20th century, most books that got published sold at least 1,000 copies. Today, 80% of books sell fewer than 100 copies, and only 6% of books sell 1,000. And the problem in the 20th century was that a lot of authors were frustrated. Publishers kept saying, no, 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 you can't, I'm not going to publish your book. And so there were a lot of frustrated authors with manuscripts sitting in file drawers who couldn't get their books published. Nowadays, anybody can publish anything. And you may not get a fat contract with Simon and Schuster, but if you want to publish a book, you can. You can self-publish, you can hire a hybrid publishing company. There are all kinds of different ways to publish. And so we have this huge glut. The result of that is plummeting sales per title. And so authors who release books and think they're going to sell thousands of copies, chances are they're not. I mean, your first goal as an author should be to sell 100 copies. If you can sell 100 copies, you're in the top 20% of new release sales. And then beyond that, good luck selling more. I hope you sell as many as you can and hope you sell thousands. But like I said, only 6% of books today, only 6% of books released in 2024 will sell 1,000 copies. And that's very disappointing to a whole lot of authors. But I'm sorry, that's reality. And if you don't understand that, then all you can do is be bitter and depressed. If you do understand it, then your job is first to sell 100 copies. That puts you in the top 20%, and then try and keep selling, and maybe you'll sell some more.